On this edition of the Maximize Your Medicare podcast, a very special guest. You can probably guess that I come into a wide range of people across the country on financial matters, etc., for one way or the other. My next guest is Kevin Cole, the nation's most renowned Gershwin pianist. Chicago Tribune has recently reviewed his latest album and basically said that this is the way that the composer intended the music to sound. The edited video version is going to be up in a couple of days after we're done working on it. But here on the Maximize Your Medicare podcast, much more than Medicare, we've got the full unedited version of our conversation. Enjoy. The Chicago Tribune called my next guest the country's leading Gershwin pianist and called his latest recording a revolutionary, what is the exact word? A revelatory new recording of Gershwin's landmark Concerto in F. For that, I welcome Kevin Cole. How are you, Kevin? Thank you for joining me.
I'm very well, Jay. Thanks for having me on board today.
So, this review in the Chicago Tribune said basically that this is the way that the composer intended. I don't think it gets better than that, does it?
No. Anytime you get a review like that, it's a gift, first of all, because you're trying to do your best. And since Gershwin has been, I don't want to say in my blood, but he's been on my shoulder most of my career, to have that kind of verbiage said about your performance is what you hope for. Because what makes this recording, first of all, stand out is that recently the scores have been restored back to Gershwin's original markings, notes, everything. Because, things get edited over time.
Sure.
So we were the first recording to use these, they call them texts or the real deal.
So if I think about it, this is a recording from Naxos, which is, for persons who don't know about classical music recordings, one of the very largest, high quality, if you will, of the, labels. I think that is very, very safe to say. Is this your first time with a large label like this?
Yeah, this is my first commercial recording. I have produced myself in about 5 different recordings and CDs available for sale at my concerts or
Sure.
through Amazon or whatnot. But this is my very first commercial recording, and so it was very exciting. I mean, Jay, that so many of the big record companies, they don't promote like back in the day anymore,
No,
and there aren't that many. They still are pressing CDs, but most people are streaming this online, which I understand. But it's a big deal because there are 4 works that Gershwin wrote for piano and orchestra that I play all over the world. And this is the major one because it's an actual concerto.
Actual concerto, right.
Yeah, for piano.
Right.
Where the other works are rhapsodies.
Raps in Blue, right.
Yeah, variations. But this is as big. This is, over a half hour long. I mean, it's a big work. And so the idea, fingers crossed, is that in the summer of 2022, I'll record the other 3 works in time for the Rhapsody in Blue Centennial, which is in 2024, and the Concerto in F Centennial, which is in 2025.
Now, it's the centennial. So you had mentioned in the past that also means something to copyright type of stuff, or what happened?
Well, it's interesting already because I think it's 95 years is the limit. The Rhapsody in Blue is in public domain, and as of this year, the Concerto in F is in public domain. What that means is that the scores that have been published to this point are free use. I mean, you can buy them, but you don't have to pay a royalty on them to the copyright owners. The difference, though, is with these new editions, which are actually the originals, which we've been waiting for a long, long time. Because right after Gershwin died, editors at the music publishing houses wanted to get their hands in there. Right. Well, they just want to put their name on there saying, well, Gershwin didn't really know what he was doing when he was orchestrating. He didn't study in Europe, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to correct his mistakes. And one of my favorite quotes is from noted Gershwin biographer and scholar Edward Jablonski, who was from Bay City, Michigan, my hometown, who said, better Gershwin mistakes than some hacks improvements.
Right.
Right. They didn't know how to handle what Gershwin was doing with an orchestra. I mean, it was just, he was asking them to play rhythms that were very foreign to most of the musicians playing in symphony orchestras in the 20s were European born. Right. So this was new to introduce jazz and syncopation and Charleston rhythms and all of that. And so he had to loosen their ties and their shoulders a bit to get them to do it. So editors, of course, go in there and say, oh, we're going to make this more standard symphony orchestra, blah, blah. And so now we've gone back. And when you hear them, what is remarkable is that pretty much every person who's reviewed it for a publication or online has said how translucent the orchestrations are, transparent, lighter, brighter, crisper. They have all these wonderful adjectives saying, and we hear more detail. And of course, a lot of that is we had a terrific recording engineer in Philip Rowland. And it's just, you hear what he intended and you marvel at it because the Concerto in F, the recording I just did, came out about within a year of writing the Rhapsody in Blue, his first public serious piece for jazz band and piano. So to jump from that to a full symphony orchestra. Full-fledged,
right,
is within 10 months. It's amazing. Yeah.
So tell me, how did the whole process go? Like, how did you get approached by the record company? How long did that whole thing go? People don't know how this works. I don't know. I've got like a billion questions for you, but let's just start there.
Okay. Well, it starts with the conductor, because any soloist, for the most part, is hired because the conductor says, I want to work with them. I think they would be great for this program of Beethoven or Gershwin or Bach. And sometimes, I should say most times, the conductor has already worked with the soloists, so they know what they bring to the table.
I got you.
So in this case, the National Orchestra Institute, which is the summer institute at the University of Maryland, made up of players from all over the world, ages 18 through, I think, 28. And it's, I believe, a 6-week intensive where they get a different conductor every week. And what it does, it helps them prepare for their auditions for major symphonies all over the world.
I see. Yep.
And so what you get, this is the marvelous thing that this even exists. What you get are young adults who haven't played most of this repertoire, especially Gershwin. So they don't come to a rehearsal or a performance with any preconceived, oh, well, I played Rhapsody in Blue, or I played Concerto. Oh, I know how it goes. This is all new to them. So the conductor and I, working in tandem, are basically writing on blank pages. So they are fearless when it comes to giving this music its due. Also, they don't have the prejudices that still exist, where some people think, oh, well, he's not Beethoven. Gershwin's not. So it's for pops, and there's that kind of snobbery about it. They don't have that. Music is music to these young adults. So you have that to start with. David Allen Miller, whose primary orchestra is the Albany Symphony in Albany, New York, has been the conductor I have performed Gershwin with the most with symphony orchestras, starting in the year 2000. So we have a 20-plus year relationship. And he really gets it. He gets what I want to do. I get what he wants to do. And he's just the right conductor to make this happen. He also knows how to convey, because you can be a marvelous conductor, but sometimes you can't convey exactly what's in your head to an orchestra. He does so very efficiently, very energetically, but he gets that. Because what's happened over time is the Gershwin symphonic works have become heavier. They've gained weight, and it
They've gained
started.
weight. They've gained weight among the repertoire of different performances,
Well, no, no, not in a
trying
good
to
way.
add their own.
Well, no, not in a good way. They've gained weight in the sense that tempos have slowed down.
Okay.
Orchestras are getting lusher and fatter, and it unfortunately started with Leonard Bernstein with his recording in the 50s of Rhapsody in Blue. And I love Lenny. Who doesn't? I mean, he could do it all. But the thing we have to remember is that George Gershwin died in 1937. It was about the time Leonard Bernstein was coming. Stein, I always do that. Bernstein, I'll say Stein. Bernstein was coming on the scene, and so by the early 40s, especially 44 with Fancy Free and On the Town and things like that, he was kind of bridging that gap between American music that Gershwin had started, American and classical music. And people were looking for another Gershwin because Gershwin died at the age of 38. So they felt cheated. So here comes Bernstein. Oh, he's our next Gershwin. Well, no one's the next Gershwin. It's Gershwin. Just like no one's the next Bernstein. He's Lenny. But unfortunately, and he's a phenomenal pianist. When he conducted the Rhapsody from the piano, that became the recording that pretty much set the standard. Every pianist wanted to play it like that. And so he set that up. Well, it's a very, to me, as a pianist, very self-indulgent, but he didn't have a lot of respect for the Rhapsody in Blue. He even said so in interviews. He said, it's a bunch of tunes strung together, Okay. And, basically he felt Gershwin had a lot of chutzpah to put all this together, these tunes, and kind of stitched them very flimsily in his mind, So when you have it in your head, even if it's subconscious, it still comes across. Okay. That being said, this I'm the Rhapsody in Blue now. And what happened was the symphony orchestras became the classical part of the Rhapsody in Blue. The piano had to provide the jazz. But when it was originally played, Gershwin's intention was the piano provides the classical and the jazz band that it was written for, Paul Whiteman's jazz band, was the jazzy part. But then when it became symphonic, things started to shift, and especially after his death. So the orchestrations became very big. And so now what I've tried to do in my approach to it is let the orchestra have some of the jazzy moments back, and I have some of the classical moments back, as well as the jazzy moments, okay? So we put the tempos brisker, especially in Concerto in F, than what people have been used to. It's been a little, it's been grander and more important and from the get-go. And we're like, no. But you have to understand, again, like I said earlier, most of the people performing this music when Gershwin wrote it were European-born, conductors especially. I don't know if we had very many American conductors in the 1920s, maybe just starting. But so some of these things you could see in the score because they mark it. They had to slow down, or they'd have to catch their breath before coming in with a downbeat for a new section. And Gershwin was just so tickled that it was being performed. He didn't get crazy on them and say, no.
What? Right.
Yeah. But given all that it wasn't a perfect premiere and all that stuff, it still communicated to an audience that this is something new. This is something different. This music speaks to us. Because you have to understand that, of course, Gershwin wrote, he was living in Manhattan, New York City, grew up in Brooklyn, but his awareness of sounds, daily sounds, just walking in the street, was all put into his music. That was his influence. He loved that all these different nationalities and cultures were coming together in New York City, trying to figure out what is being an American, because they were bringing, they were coming over. They're going through Ellis Island. They're all bringing their folk music with them, which he would hear. And he also, growing up as a kid, heard the transition from horses' hooves to automobiles and skyscrapers being built and riveters, and he heard all of that, and that was music to him. Okay,
We've got that
so
today, right? I mean, I'm not sure if you follow modern day music, but it struck me one day I saw an interview. It was Billie Eilish with Jimmy Corden, and he said she was with her brother, and she said she got some idea about some certain sound effects literally from a traffic sign that
hey,
warning light on going across the street, and she
sure.
wanted to do that, and that's infused. So it's I guess composers have a different mindset. Now, is that your background, Kevin? So maybe you can tell us, if you wind back the clock on how you got started in music at all. I'd like to, talk about that.
Sure.
Were you
Well, it
a
was by
composer? Was it
happenstance.
composition or
No, it was
performance?
playing piano. It was really by luck in the way, because I'm the youngest of three boys.
Okay.
My father played piano. He had 3 years of piano lessons as a young child. He switched to trumpet by junior high school and had 6 years of trumpet and loved music. And when he got married, he was hoping one of his three boys might do something with music because he enjoyed it so much. My mom, when as far back as I can remember, she just loved all the old songs, all the old popular songs from the 20s, 30s, and 40s. So she was always singing those, as holding me as a child, and I'm sure my brothers as well. And they had a very eclectic record collection. They didn't favor one thing. They had everything in their collection, and we're always playing records. So we were exposed to it. It was a music household in that respect. Not a performance household, because my parents were not performers, but they loved music and songs and dancing and all that. Okay. So one of my dad's 6 brothers and sisters, so Sister Margaret, lived in Detroit at the time, and she was getting rid of an old upright piano.
Okay.
Now, my folks had already noticed that in the crib, anytime music was playing, if it was a record, the radio, TV, I was moving to it and I was reacting to it. So they thought something might be there. Okay. So my aunt, my dad's sister, asked my dad's family, anybody wants this piano? Just pay for the moving from Detroit, because everyone was living in Bay City at the time. And nobody said anything except my dad thought, I played piano and we should have a piano in the house because maybe one of the boys would like it. Fine. So that's what happened. And Jay, in all honesty, I needed something to express what was boiling up inside of me. And it just happened that the piano came into the house. If my dad would have put a trumpet in my hand, a guitar, anything, I think I would have tried to master it or dug into it, because it would have been my conduit to connecting to music.
So were you trained, or
Yeah, we started with lessons. I was 4.5. We started with lessons. We just got a local teacher that was recommended because she was dating my mom's brother at the time.
Right.
So, and then she later became my aunt.
Do you remember the teacher's name?
Oh yeah, Bonnie. Well, it was Bonnie Brett at the time.
Okay.
Then she married my uncle and became Bonnie Lukowski. And she taught out of Grinnell's first, which was a store here. But then she taught out of Music Center in Bay City. But she, in those days, though, this is how ancient I am. The piano teachers used to drive to people's homes to give lessons. You didn't go to some of them you went to their house, or some of them you'd go to Music Center. But she drove to everyone's house, and she had, oh my God, I swear, I know she had like 60 to 70 students weekly. And I think the first lesson, my mom has a receipt because, I have a Polish mom. I love my Polish mom, but they save everything. Okay. They make good detectives because they have every shred of evidence. Okay. So she has the first receipt she paid for the lesson. And I think it was $1.25 for an hour. So that's how it started. I started lessons, and then I took to it. I mean, within the first 6 months, I could read music and play. And I mean, I was devouring music. She couldn't get it to me fast enough. She'd say, okay, next week, we're going to do this piece and this piece. She'd turn the pages, and I'd say, I already played that. Well, let me hear it. And I'd play it. She'd, okay, then she'd turn a few more. I already played that. Because when I'd get done practicing the lesson for the following week, I was already going ahead because that wasn't enough to feed me. I don't want to say it came easy. It wasn't so much that. It was just, it wasn't enough to satisfy me just having 2 or 3 pieces for the following week.
How long or who was it? Was it your teacher who said, Kevin, actually, in addition to being a hobby, this should be something more serious for you?
Yeah.
Did you always have that?
What's interesting, it wasn't with my first teacher. It actually was with my second teacher, which was at the Holy Rosary Academy in Bay City, which pretty much was run by nuns, a certain order of nuns.
Sure.
And it was recommended that I move on to a teacher that could take me to the next level, because I wasn't going anywhere with Aunt Bonnie, bless her heart.
Well, there can be limits. There are limits.
Right. And the thing is, it was hard for her to let me go because basically I was her cash cow.
You're the star pupil, of course.
Well, right. And she'd have these recitals, Jay. They would go on, I'm not lying, 3 to 4 to almost 5 hours, because she had so many students. And she never taught her students that if you make a mistake in the middle of the piece, keep going. No, they would go back to the beginning and start over.
Okay.
So you can imagine how many some people had 4 or 5 mistakes, and you're like, oh, this will never. And I was always last on the program, of course. So I was attracting students because, wow, Bonnie's teaching Kevin. Listen to how he plays. She's got to be a great teacher,
right?
And so, so that was part of the picture. So someone said, it's time. Kevin, has he ever gone to Interlochen or Blue Lake or some of these summer programs? Has he ever entered any competitions? No. And here I am already approaching 7th grade. So I've been with her, eight going on 9 years already. So anyway, once I switched over to Sister Catherine, was her name, Sister Catherine Williams, she entered me in the Bay Music Foundation scholarship competition, my first competition ever. And in doing so, I won for the intermediate division with the highest score they had ever given anyone out of a possible 100. You'll love this. I got 96 3/4. Now, you probably want to know what I got marked off for. That 3 1/4.
Yeah, exactly. How do you get to 96 3/4?
Well, what it was I basically aced the piece I played was a nocturne by Edvard Grieg. And I aced that. They had nothing but praise, and I'm just a little kid. I didn't shoot up in height. I was small. And then what they do, they give you a piece to sight read, and I'm a good sight reader. And apparently 2 out of the 3 didn't like the way I sight read their piece, so they had to mark me down a little bit, So, but anyway,
right.
But
so
being able to use that, using that scholarship in '72, the summer of '72, I went for the 8-week camp, because it was 8 weeks in those days, and that just changed everything. But I have to say, the summer before that, in '71, Delta College here used to have a summer music conservatory. So my parents enrolled me in that. And we had a day trip by bus, school bus, to Interlochen, because I'd never seen Interlochen. Of course, I'd heard of it.
Sure.
So when I was there for that day trip to see Interlochen in the summer of '71, I said on the bus ride home with my friends, I'm going to be here at the camp. And I had no idea that September, my new teacher, would say, I'm going to enter you into this competition. And if you win, first prize is a half scholarship to Interlochen. And it happened. The same thing that summer at Interlochen, when I found out they had a boarding school called the Interlochen Arts Academy. Now it's called Interlochen Center for the Arts. I said to fellow campers, I'm going to come back and go to the school here. Oh, yeah, sure, Cole, yeah. And so lo and behold, my senior year, I went to the Interlochen. So you have to be careful what you say out loud, is my philosophy, because if you say it out loud and believe it, for me at least, it usually comes true.
So that's how you got the exposure originally. Of course, Interlochen being National Music Camp, with lots of different exposures of performers and other fellow students. From there, where did you go? You went to conservatory for college?
Well, no, here's the deal. This was interesting. Right after graduating in '77 from the Interlochen Arts Academy, of course, during that year, I had been sending in audition tapes
Mhm.
and materials, um, and I was, being offered scholarships to U of M, Michigan State. I had also applied to Manhattan School of Music, Juilliard, and USC. I think those were my five, because they wanted you to do at least 4 or 5 applications, and I was accepted at all of them. But the problem is, with a Juilliard or a Manhattan School of Music, you have to figure out your own housing, because in those days they did not have dormitories.
Mm.
It's changed some now, but back then, no, you have to figure out how you're going to live. And I'm from a poor background. There was no trust fund, baby here, Jay. So anyway, the thought was, I said, well, I had such an intense senior year at Interlochen. I said, I need to take a step back. Let me just take a step back and figure this out. Because money-wise, I don't. So I wanted to go to the
Manhattan, right?
Yeah, I wanted to go to Manhattan School of Music because there was a teacher there by the name of Robert Goldsand. He was a fantastic teacher. He was a pupil of Moritz Rosenthal, who in turn was a pupil of Franz Liszt. So his lineage was part of this grand romantic style of playing that pianists had, like Horowitz, Rachmaninoff, from that era, late 1890s, 1880s, into the turn of the century. All right. And that resonated with me, because even at that point, I was improvising and doing my own arrangements of tunes and stuff. And
so
but it was
actually,
that kind of thing. Yeah.
So you were actually doing the arranging, from home, just by yourself, unassisted, creating variations of existing?
Yeah, I mean, I was, all through my high school years, because I went to All Saints High School first for 3 years, and then to Interlochen Arts Academy. I was always improvising and creating my own medleys from musicals or songs or whatever.
Okay. So you're actually, from the composing, that was always kind of your thought, to really be on the composing improvisation end, or was it pure, I'm going to replay, particular sonata by, Mozart, etc.?
Well,
it's bias.
Well, here's the deal. How my improvising and my arranging skills started was really my mom's doing. Because when I started lessons, I would say by the time, within 2 years of lessons, so I'm probably in first grade, starting into second grade, my mom would be in the kitchen, and of course she'd worry about me because I'd rather play than eat. So she'd be getting things ready for supper, and I'm playing, and she loved it. But what she would do is she'd hear me practice my lesson, what was expected of me for the following week. And then she'd say, hey, give it your own thing. And the language she used, she goes, give it the old Ricky tick. And what she was saying to me, without her realizing, she was giving me permission to go play the piece again, but do what I wanted with it.
On top of it.
Yeah. So once she gave me that permission, that turned into all sorts of freedom for me. And actually, I learned as I was getting more serious teachers and study, and especially at Interlochen, that they complemented each other. The technique that I had to develop to play the serious classical works certainly gave me freedom to do what I want improvising, because I had technique. I mean, because you're born with, just like an Olympic athlete, you're born with abilities that just your body can do, and maybe somebody else can't. Who knows why? It's just the coordination, brain, and the whole. Okay,
absolutely.
So those are gifts, and then it's how you develop them,
absolutely,
and how far you can take them. Okay, so having to develop my technique gave me freedom with my improvisations and creating arrangements.
So it's only a year though at Interlochen, right? I mean, so.
Well, but let me finish though, because the reverse of that is true. Having a mind that was free to improvise allowed me to interpret classical music and serious music with a freedom that most students do not have, because they have to do it exactly as their teacher tells them. So I get into trouble because the teacher would say, well, this is the way. I go, well, why is it this way? Well, you got to put your finger on that note. Well, why? This doesn't work. So, it worked both ways. And I like that for me. I'm a kind of a hybrid that way. And I think that's why so early on in my life, I was attracted to Gershwin's music because it was played in the serious halls. He was writing serious works. He was writing pop songs. He was writing for Broadway. And it was all music to him. There were no divisions. There were no hard, fast lines being drawn, even though critics were trying to do that to him. And I kind of felt the same way about music. Why can't I play chamber music one day and show music the next? What was wrong with that? But that was taboo for a youngster because of my skills. They wanted me to go the route of the big competitions, Tchaikovsky competition, Van Cliburn, and I could have done it. I had the chops. There was no question. But it just, for what purpose? There are 5,000 other classical pianists, who play perfectly well. What is going to be my soapbox? What is going to be my directive? What am I going to contribute on a grander scale than just being another one they can hire and people listen and go, that was a pleasant evening?
It's a good question, and actually this dovetails exactly what I was going to ask you, which was that, from your experience, and now you're not new, you've seen and heard lots of different types of pianists. So you intentionally chose Gershwin because of the fact that it was your edge or because of your passion? Because I could certainly make the argument that, and you could hear it on YouTube or on, I literally have at least 10 to 20 versions of Chopin nocturnes or Beethoven sonatas. And now if you hear the third movement of Moonlight Sonata, you can see 20-year-olds rip this thing off in grandiose style with crazy technique and speed and power. And how would you be able to distinguish yourself amongst this 20 who hit record?
And of course, these four works of Gershwin, but especially Rhapsody in Blue and Concerto in F, are the most performed piano pieces in any given year. They have been for years. And if you stop and think, is there another, because they consider, even though it's Rhapsody in Blue, it's considered a piano concerto when they hire you. You're playing a concerto because you're the soloist. Right. Sure. But can you think of another American piano concerto that people request other than Gershwin's? No. And Barber wrote one, and Howard Hanson wrote one. I mean, you just go on there.
There are just a few.
Substantial American composers have written piano concertos, but they have not caught on. There's a reason for that. The other thing is, and I thought about this in more recent years, is what was I thinking to make Gershwin an American music?
That's what I was thinking. That's what
my platform, because there are more recordings of Rhapsody, Blue, Concerto in F than any other piece for piano and orchestra. Oh yeah. I mean, next up would be Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto, Rachmaninoff's second Piano Concerto, and probably the Grieg A minor concerto. Those are like the three most popular for orchestras to play, for their audiences. Those are the ones people request. But I mean, pretty much every serious pianist worth their salt plays the Rhapsody in Blue and probably the Concerto in F. So why not pick something more obscure? Because it's like career suicide. But this is where Ed Jablonski came into the picture, the Gershwin biographer and writer who was from Bay City, because it was through him I got to play for Gershwin's inner circle of friends and his sister and family. And they were the ones that said, when I was a teenager, they said, we never thought we'd hear the piano sound like George again. So there was that new layer added to it, because I didn't know I sounded like Gershwin. No,
how would you know?
Like Gershwin? I wouldn't know. I was like, the first time I met Jablonski and he said that to me, the first time he heard me play in his living room on a spinet, he said, has anyone ever told you? Because I played a little Gershwin medley of my own creation and the first two piano preludes, which are the most famous ones. Okay. And after I got done on this little out-of-tune spinet in his living room, he and his wife were there. I'm 15 years old. I'm actually in New York to audition for Tanglewood for the summer. But I knew about Jablonski, and so I wanted to meet him. And that's a whole nother story on how that happened. But let me get to this one, which is basically when I played my little made-up Gershwin medley and the two preludes, the second I finished, he said, has anyone ever told you when you play Gershwin, you sound like Gershwin?
Okay, so you've skipped timeline here, right? Because that means that at 15, somebody told you, highly qualified, one whose word you could actually put into your memory and saying, someone strictly qualified here is
yeah.
You know.
Well, and the other thing, Jay, after he said that, as I told you, when you play Gershwin, you sound like Gershwin. He then put on reel-to-reel recordings from Gershwin when he had a radio program called Music by Gershwin in the early 30s, and he was doing it to raise money so he could have the time to write Porgy and Bess.
Right.
So I got to not only, and he played, so I got to hear him play for the first time and also speak for the first time. And Ed says, don't you think you sound like that? So I actually got to hear it and go, God, I guess I do, but I don't know. Is there something in the water? What are the odds that the foremost Gershwin authority and pianists are both from Bay City? Now, some people might blame it on what was in the water, but
that's still to be determined.
Well, you know what I say? I say what do I say? It proves the point on how powerful music can be, no matter where you live, and how it can change your life. Because my hearing, when I was in second grade, they were advertising on TV a late night movie, which I think would start around 11:30 at night. I was going to be on a school night. I think it was a Tuesday, if I remember correctly, Tuesday or Wednesday. It was called Rhapsody in Blue, the story of George Gershwin. And even at that age, at 7 years old, by then I'd been playing 3 years. I knew about Gershwin because my parents had a recording of Rhapsody in Blue in their collection. So I was aware of him and his songs, but I'd never heard a big dose of it. Well, the movie, I learned years later, was like pure Hollywood made up. It's not really his life. But all the music performers in that, Oscar Levant, the greatest Gershwin player after Gershwin, the original cast of Porgy and Bess, Al Jolson and Doon Swanee. I mean, all the performers were people that knew Gershwin and premiered these works of his. So that hit me so hard. And my parents, God bless them, let me stay up on a school night. Because, in second grade, you're in bed by 7:30. But I made a deal with them. When I got home, I said, tomorrow night, this late movie is going to be on. I said, if I come home tomorrow, do my homework and go to bed right away after my homework, will you wake me up at 11:30 so I can watch it? And they said, yeah. So that led to me, once I left Gershwin, I was just like out of my mind. That following Saturday, which was our day for my mom to take my brothers and I to the local downtown. Well, actually, we did the South End Bay City Library, public library, to get our books. But I think this time we went downtown, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure we did. And I immediately went up to the woman at the desk and said, do you have any books on Gershwin? And she said, well, just a moment. And she came back and she said, this is the best one. It's called The Gershwin Years by Lawrence Stewart and Edward Jablonski. And did you know Edward Jablonski is from Bay City, Michigan? And I was just like, what? And so it was like, I couldn't read all the text of the book, but I certainly could see the pictures of his life, read the captions there. And it was right then and there at age 7, I made a pact with myself that one day I'm going to New York City and I'm going to find Ed Jablonski and let him know how much I love Gershwin and I'm from Bay City. So what happened then, 8 years later, my first trip to New York, and the moment I got into the hotel, the Americana Hotel, which I think is just a Sheraton now, I pulled out the Manhattan phone book, which was huge, probably almost as big as I was, turned the page to Jablonski, E, and there was a whole bunch of them. And I literally put my finger on one, called him,
and that was the right one?
and it was him, yeah. And I remember exactly what I said. I said, hello, is this Ed Jablonski? He goes, yes. I said, well, my name's Kevin Cole. I play the piano. I'm from Bay City, Michigan, and I love Gershwin. I might have said two.
You couldn't have made that up. You couldn't call up a random person and make that up. So you knew that.
No, I said, I love Gershwin too. And then there was this chuckle on the other end of the phone. And through our conversation, he and his wife invited me for supper the following night. And that's when I played for him. You know, that's the backstory to playing for him and him saying what he did. So what consequently happened during parts of my summer, starting, you know, in my junior year, senior year, and then once I'm out of high school, I would go for a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks at a time, and stay with the Jablonskis.
I see.
And because they had kids, well, their youngest was my age, Emily, and they have another daughter, Carla, and David. And he would have these gatherings, and one in particular was when he had Gershwin's sister, Frances, her husband, Leopold Godowsky II, whose father was the famous classical pianist, Leopold Godowsky. Also, Leopold Godowsky II was one of the co-creators of Kodachrome for Kodak, so made a zillion off of that. And he also had Kay Swift, who was a paramour of Gershwin's, but a composer in her own right, who helped him write out Porgy and Bess, and, you know, was his right-hand gal, Emily Paley and Mabel Shermer. And so he had this afternoon where I sat and I played my Gershwin medley. What he did first. Oh, that's right. Ed had a reel-to-reel recording of me playing the first movement of the Concerto in F, which I did at Interlaken, not by winning Interlaken's concerto competition, which I did not win. But Michigan, the state of Michigan, used to have a Michigan Youth Arts Festival, and Central Michigan University used to host it. They had an honors orchestra that would meet, I don't know, a couple of times a month down at the University of Michigan, made up of students, 125 students from all over the state. I think they had to audition for it. And then their prize was at the end of the school year, they would play this concert. And this particular year was going to be held at Interlaken, my senior year. So I entered the competition unbeknownst to my piano teacher at Interlaken, because he wanted me to stop playing the concerto now, blah, 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 all this stuff. So I literally forged his signature on the application for this competition, the Michigan Youth Arts Festival, because they had they had a string category, woodwinds, voice, piano, and brass. So I entered it. And the only thing is, the night before, or the day before the competition, I told my teacher, I said, I want to play this, because I had to have a second pianist with me, my friend Jerry Schubert. She did the second piano, the orchestra part for the competition. I said, I want to play this for you because tomorrow I'm in this competition. He goes, what? I said, no, I just want to play it for you, see what you say. So I played through it. He said, sounds terrific. I said, okay, well, I'm going to competition tomorrow. Bye. You know, so we did. Long story short, I win first place, and you get to play once you win. I think it was like 2 weeks later on the air on WCMU on the radio, and I thought that was it. Well, the orchestra's prize, the Michigan Youth Arts Symphony, for having all these months of rehearsals, they were playing their own concert, and it just so happened to be at Interlaken the next day. So Roger Jacoby, who was the president of Interlaken, knew about this, called up Charles Gabriel, I think was the conductor's name at U of M, calls him up that week and says, you will program Kevin's movement of the Concerto in F as part of your Sunday program, won't you? So I was kind of vindicated because I didn't win Interlaken's competition. I brought my own orchestra in May. It was just like 3 weeks before graduating. And here I am, and they're doing all this other repertoire. And then I come on stage to play my one movement. And so it was a real blast. But so anyway, that recording is what I had a copy of it for Ed. He played it for the Gershwin family and inner circle of friends.
Okay.
And I'm sitting there on the bench of his little spinet, because I haven't played live for them yet for this little afternoon tea party. And Jay, it was the creepiest thing, because I am all of, at that point, I think I would have been 17 or 18. It had to be, yeah, because I just graduated from Interlochen, and I think that was during that summer of '77 that this happened, I believe. All of a sudden, it was playing, and one got up and left the room. Another one gets up and leaves the room. Another one gets up and leaves the room, and they're coming back with tissue, and you know, I'm a youngster. I'm thinking, oh my God, it's so bad. They're crying, you know, not knowing that it wasn't because it was so bad. It was because they heard this. They heard George Gershwin. I mean, they heard something that I have in my playing that evoked this connection they all had to George. And so when it was done is when Kay Swift, you know, she said, I never thought I'd hear the piano sound like George again. And George's sister, Frankie, said, you have all these sharp rhythms, and it just like my brother did. So then they wanted to hear me live, I'm sure, to make sure that this was not some phony thing. So I played my Gershwin medley, and when I got done, it was really something. And then Kay Swift, who used to play two pianos with Gershwin, they'd improvise and work out stuff. It was suggested, Kay, why don't you join Kevin on the piano bench? And I was just like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. So she said, well, what part do you want to play? Top part, bottom part? I said, well, I'll play the top part. So we picked a tune, because, you know, what Gershwin tune do you pick? And we're just going to improvise on it. And it's a song called Dear Little Girl, which comes from his 1926 musical, OK, K-A-Y. But it wasn't written about Kay Swift because he hadn't met her yet, all right? So we start out the tune, and she's, you know, playing the bass and chord, like rhythm kind of, and I'm doing the melody. Well, Jay, there was a point while we're playing that all of a sudden we went into the same lick. We went into the same rhythm, which was, you wouldn't, somehow we were connected in such a way that we went into this really offbeat rhythm as we were playing the piece, going through it the second time. And we looked at each other, I remember, on the bench, and kind of smiled. And literally, I felt I had done this before. And I'm not one of those. I'm not reincarnating George. No one will be George Gershwin. But and luckily, it was recorded because Ed recorded that afternoon, and their comments. It's somewhere in my storage unit. I know it exists because he duped it down. It was a reel to reel. He duped it down to a cassette. So I have it somewhere.
So let's go back to,
yeah.
So now you're discovered. I mean, you get your break, right? You've met Gershwin's family, direct family, and they have basically anointed you. From that point, you know, are decades from then to now, from 18 to, you know, 18, you're a young man, teenager, not too early though by any means in a musician's life, right? I mean, 18, you know, the cream of the crop is already has been, you know, identified, right, in violin or piano or whatever instrument. Absolutely. So where did your career go from that point? Now you're a young adult. Did you go to a formal schooling, or did you end up doing that? Or?
Well, as I had mentioned, Manhattan School of Music, because of the teacher Robert Goldsand, was my school of choice. But here's what happened. The real story is, I went to the audition on my audition day, and you're waiting out in a hallway. And the Manhattan School of Music building is actually the old Juilliard School of Music before Juilliard moved to Lincoln Center. Okay. So I'm, hearing other people play it. In fact, a couple of the people before me were playing the same Chopin Ballade No. 2. And, but that didn't freak me out at all, because I thought, well, and some of these were grad students, and I was auditioning for undergrad. So they didn't freak me out because I thought, well, I played as well as that, so, but something happened to me, because I did realize that even if I got accepted and even if I got a full scholarship, how in the hell am I going to live in New York? At that time, I mean, I'd have to get a job, and I'd have to figure. I had no way, because I was sleeping on friends' couches. I was at Jablonski's. I was at some friends in New Jersey. I I was just bouncing around a lot of my Interlochen colleagues who had just graduated with me from the Arts Academy. Some were already going to Juilliard, some were at different places. But they came from families of means where their parents could pay for an apartment monthly, and I don't. So it was the person just ahead of me that was in doing their audition, and I thought, I gotta leave. I can't do this. Why even waste your time? So I walked out.
So you did not go to the audition.
Well, but here's what happened. I walked out, got on the bus, went back to New Jersey where I was staying with friends, so one of my Interlochen colleagues. But I had to have their phone number was the contact number. The very next day, Robert Goldsand, the piano teacher, calls me. Where were you? And he was from Vienna, so he had a little bit of an accent. Where were you? And I explained to him. I said, I just didn't feel worthy. He said, I want to see you this week. You come tomorrow to my studio, 6:00, and I want to see you and hear you. I said, okay. Because he had played at Interlochen my senior year, and that's where I heard him. And when I heard that, the tone, how he played, I was just like, oh my way. He could play a C major scale and make you weep. And I went, okay, I want that. I know I can do that. I want to know how to do that. So I went the next day, took the bus into the city, went to Manhattan School of Music, and I get into his studio and he says, play what you're going to play for your audition. So I had a movement of Beethoven's Sonata, I had the Chopin Ballade, and then I had Gershwin 3 Preludes. Lo and behold, he had recorded on commercial recordings. He's actually, even though he's European born, he's recorded more American piano works at that time than any other pianist had. And he was the equal to Horowitz and Rubinstein, but he didn't have the PR machine behind him like they did, even though he had his Carnegie debut when he was 16.
He wasn't married to one. He also wasn't married to one of the composers.
Yeah. So anyway, I played
Horowitz. For people who didn't know, that's Vladimir Horowitz. But anyway, let's
So after I got done playing my audition works for him, he said, let's go back. And he always had this little stub of a cigar. I don't know if he really smoked it, but he had it there, and it wasn't lit or anything, but he was just so kind. And I remember noticing up close, because I hadn't seen his hands up close before, that he had the advantage physically that these 4 fingers were almost even across. As you notice, we have spaces,
Right.
He didn't. This finger was almost as long as that, and this one. So talk about for even touch. When they're almost, I thought, oh my word, I'm gonna have an operation. Chop that up. No. So anyway, we went back through a few pieces, and what I loved about it, because I had these teachers that half the lesson was spent. They talked about what they did, who they did, made music with, blah blah blah. It was more about their career than it was about a lesson, and that can be entertaining. But I want to learn. Okay, I want to get. I'm paying you to give me something of what you got so I can move on. He didn't do that. He said, okay, this measure here, play that for me, or at least 4 measures, and I'd play. And then he'd go, oh, why don't you try? And he'd show me something, and I'd go, okay. Everything he pointed out, and there weren't a lot, I'd say half a dozen, 8 different things and pieces. Everything, what he told me to do, fixed it immediately. No fuss. No muss, no pontificating, just try this. And I went, oh my God, this is amazing. So what happened to end the chapter with Goldsand was I studied privately with him because I could not afford to go to the school and live in Manhattan. So for about 6 months of sleeping on people's couches, I studied privately with him.
What's your first big break after that?
Well, I came back to Michigan then because I didn't know what I was going to do.
All right.
And so I thought, well, I got to get myself out there as soloist so that I'll get hired. And so Saginaw Symphony, I had played in the orchestral piano as a member of the orchestra in my high school years because I was early high school years, junior high and high school, because I was studying with the then conductor Gideon Grau's wife, Irene Grau. She was after Sister Catherine. So I had that experience. And then I entered competition, and I think one of them was you get to play a movement with the Saginaw. It was called Saginaw Symphony in those days. And I did. And so then I got hired a couple of times as soloist with Saginaw. And then that branched out to a few other Michigan orchestras. But it was basically, it was a haphazard career in the early days because I had this reputation that I had to push out there of playing Gershwin like Gershwin. Okay. And I had to promote that and hope conductors would say, well, I can get, Aunt Tilly to play Rhapsody in Blue.
Right.
Why would I get Kevin? But once they had me, then I'd be a repeat performer with the group. And that's the whole thing. See, I have to hit a home run, especially with these pieces that like they can hire anyone for. I have to prove to them that I can hit a home run every time I'm at bat at that piano. Because I don't have the television or film or whatever exposure that some people like Along Long in today's world or others back in the day had. And so the proof is in my playing. I can't make mistakes. I just can't. And if I make them, nobody better know except me.
Right.
Because my next job depends on it. So basically, Jay, it was just word of mouth through conductors and the executive directors, orchestra managers who would say, yeah, we had a great experience with Kevin. They'd say, somebody would say, hey, we're looking for a soloist for. Oh yeah, you want to get Kevin? Oh really? He's that good? Oh yeah. The audiences just go crazy, and he's a really nice guy. But whatever. And so my whole life has been that way. I did not have an agent, a legitimate agent. I had people I would hire like as business managers and try to get work for me, but they weren't in those circles. It was only a few years ago that for a 3-year commitment, I had William Reiner, who's very well respected, been in the business 40 plus years, and a super nice guy. And we had an exclusive arrangement for 3 years. And it worked sometimes and sometimes it didn't. It's just, again, the way the marketplace is for hiring pianists. So now I'm not on an exclusive with him, but if he finds, a gig for me with the symphony orchestra, he gets his 20%, which is the average an agent gets. So it's good. Oh, I'm bumping myself. So it's a good thing in that respect, because I'm still free to do, my own thing and whatnot.
So in these decades, what's of all the places the venues you've played, the most spectacular, over the top location, at least in the United States? What would you call it?
Well, it's a trifecta. It's hard to say one. I mean, if I was really pressed to say one, it's got to be Carnegie Hall. I mean, that's every kid's dream, at least from my era, is to play Carnegie Hall. I did. It's funny. I played Gershwin with the Albany Symphony. It was part of a program that doesn't exist anymore that they would do called something had to do with Spring for Music, I think is what it was called. And the whole idea of this festival, it was a week-long festival, was they'd have 5 different orchestras. You had the orchestras had to submit a program of lesser known works by American composers.
I see.
Things that aren't played as often. And so the Albany Symphony had already got on the program, and then so they submitted again. But if you've been on it 1 year, you have to skip a year. You can't reapply, so it's every 2 years. So David Allen Miller, the conductor, I remember very distinctly, because this is going to sound like name dropping, so I apologize.
No, that's okay. No problem.
But I was actually visiting my friend Dan Brown, the author of the Da Vinci Code.
Oh, was that right?
Books. Yeah. Well, that's another story. We became friends when I was out in LA back in the day, a struggling singer-songwriter. He was a struggling singer-songwriter, and we met.
Not struggling any longer.
No. But anyway, I was actually visiting him.
Okay.
In New Hampshire, when I got a call from David Allen Miller saying, "Hey, I'm going to submit this program to Carnegie Hall for this festival." He said, I want to do both Rhapsodies, the Rhapsody in Blue and the second Rhapsody, because the way we do Rhapsody in Blue is unlike anybody else, even though it's a really well-known piece. The way we interpret it is so authentic to Gershwin, and putting the two rhapsodies together. So he submitted that, but then the committee said, eh. So it just became the second Rhapsody, which is the piece I had at that point played the least. I think I'd only played it 3 other times before Carnegie Hall. Excuse me. And then I thought, I don't care if he asked me to play Mary Had a Little Lamb, it's Carnegie Hall,
Right.
and it's taken me 50 years to get there. Okay. Because it happened in 2013. And so I did. I played the second Rhapsody, which is actually the name that Gershwin gave it was the New York Rhapsody. And then just like a couple of weeks before the premiere, someone said, oh, no, that's not, you need something that sounds more classy than that. So he said, all right, second Rhapsody, which I think is a horrible name because, second always sounds like it's not quite as good as the first Rhapsody. Yeah. Right. But anyway, I played it. It was broadcast all over the country. But David is, the conductor, David Allen Miller, is so good to me. He did the same thing when I made my debut at Hollywood Bowl in 2003, 10 years earlier. Wow. And I did the Rhapsody in Blue there. He said, you're going to play your Gershwin medley. And now for the Hollywood Bowl, we had 2 nights. It was all Gershwin. And I played my full, 10 songs in 10-minute medley. But he said, but for Carnegie Hall, he said, because it's on the radio, everything's timed. Can you do that 10-minute medley like in 5 minutes?
Oh, my.
And I said, you bet I can.
Really?
So I did. I was able to, in my head, trim it down. And it is so high powered. And the audience goes absolutely berserk. So I did it as an encore at Carnegie Hall, which was not planned. Nobody knew except the conductor and I. And even the radio announcers, you can say, oh. But I'm so glad he gave me that opportunity. Carnegie, but the 3 places in the States that are the remarkable ones for me were, Carnegie Hall, Hollywood Bowl, and Kennedy Center. There are others, of course. And the Ravinia Festival, it has its own special place in my heart because out of the 20 summers, I think I performed 13 out of 20 they had me, which is a remarkable record for, I'm not Tony Bennett. They don't have me every year. So I count my blessings because of the Wells Kaufman, who is now the former CEO of Ravinia. So Ravinia has its own special altar. But I
do want to return to Chicagoland, actually. So
but I have to go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one footnote on Carnegie Hall. What makes it so special? Okay, because I had been to concerts there, and I know what made it special from an audience. But I had no clue being on stage how it felt, how the room sounded, how you feel, how you connect in that room. Why is it so revered? Okay. First, that concert was in May of 2013. In March of 2013, I was in New York, and part of my reason for being there was Carnegie Hall folk wanted me to choose the Steinway concert grand to play. And they have 2. They have a Hamburg one, and they have an American Steinway. And so literally, I went in at 12:30 in the afternoon, and the stage manager's there, and there's nobody in the room at Carnegie Hall. It's just these 2 pianos on stage. And he said, take all the time you want, and then just let me know which piano you decide on. So here I am, walking on stage at Carnegie Hall, and I'm back.
Okay, you're back.
Walking on stage at Carnegie Hall to play on these 2 pianos, and there was no time limit. So I went to the Hamburg first, and it was beautiful. But Hamburgs tend to be bright and dark at the same time. I love the action. But then I played on the American one. Now, again, I was playing the second Rhapsody. And for that piece, the American one worked really great. So then I went off stage, and the stage manager there, he goes, well, what's the verdict? I said, the American one. He says, I knew it. He said, I could just tell the way you were playing. I said, yeah. So I left there, and lo and behold, I was going to go get a little bite to eat because it's probably, I don't know, 1:30, 2 o'clock, because I don't think I spent more than an hour there, even though I could have. I mean, what a luxury to be in Carnegie Hall yourself and play. It's just, So I walk out, and I go a few blocks away from there, and I'm turning the corner, and who do I run into is David Allen Miller and his son, Elias, who was there for auditioning for cello for something or other. And so we all had lunch together at a deli. And so I took that as a good sign. So the day of the concert, here's the feeling. I'm sitting there playing. And there are spots in the music, as with all concertos and rhapsodies, where you're not playing. The orchestra plays something, you're waiting for your next entrance. So I'm, this way to the audience, of course, and I'm looking at the wall, and I'm saying to myself, that is the same piece of wall that Rachmaninoff and Gershwin, and I just named hundreds, had to look at when they're sitting at this piano, just like I am right now. I'm in the spot. That's the wall they're staring at. But I made a point, too, in one of the other sections where I didn't have to play, I'm just looking out at the audience and taking it all in. Because normally you don't do that. But I said, you know what? This may be my one and only. And I felt so good up there. I said, I want to take this all in. But I will tell you this. That hall is one of the, maybe there's 2 halls in my life that actually is a living, breathing entity that talks. Well, it spoke to me when I was playing. And it basically says, what do you want to do? We can go anywhere with this. I'm right with you. Come on, let's go. And literally, I could hear that voice in my head from the hall saying, I'm with you. And when you're sitting at the piano, normally you're at a disadvantage to hear the full throttle of the sound from your instrument because the lid, it's going out. No. What you hear on stage is exactly what every seat in that place hears. So that was like, what? So the sound is all around you and it's so lush and gorgeous. You're like, am I doing this or am I just observing this happen? So it was a remarkable experience to have the hall sitting on the bench with me. That's all. That's the only way I can describe it. But the minute I left the stage, they had the guy there with the microphone talking to me on radio. Basically, I'm going to Disney World, but I didn't say that. They wanted to know how I felt and all that. And I said, I want to immediately go out there and do it again because that's the feeling. It's so unlike any place else that I got to go out there and do it again because it's just, I want that feeling again. I want that feeling every hall I play. Now, not to say that I don't have an internal feeling like that, but to have a buddy have that feeling with you and basically take you in its arms and go, come on, whatever you want to give me, let's go. And pianos can do that sometimes too. And it is, and it comes across in the recording from that broadcast. It's just, I think I sold that piece to a lot of people who go, what is a second Rhapsody? And I've had many comments people say, God, it is a marvelous piece. I had no idea. I said, well, you got to give it enough juice so it has importance.
So from those recordings, the publicity from there, was there a good springboard, a good way to market yourself and get to review?
Yeah, not really, Jay. Because I don't have a PR machine behind me. I'm kind of a one-man band.
Sure.
Because of that, I have all these moments, like Royal Albert Hall in New York and Carnegie Hall and all these things, and the reviews come out, and they're usually pretty spectacular and things, but then it just fades away, and nothing is built upon anything. I mean, I can put things on my website, but you really have to have somebody that's getting you the interviews in People magazine or whatever, or getting you on the talk show circuit, and I don't have that person or persons to keep me in the news.
In the loop.
Yeah. I mean, I get publicity just prior to a concert, depending on the orchestra's PR department.
Sure.
And I'll get a little bit afterwards when the review comes out. But after that, it's just like, next. And I go, okay. So, but I'm hoping, because I'm working with some people right now, because of these 2 centennials coming up for Rhapsody and Concerto now. I mean, I have to be the guy that everybody goes to around the globe. So the idea right now is I'm working on setting up a real tour, not just one-nighters, which is, basically my life. I just get hired for 1 or 2 concerts and that's it. There's no rhyme or reason, but I want an actually coordinated world tour for 3 years, doing nothing but an all Gershwin evening to celebrate both pieces. we'll
Before we
see.
get back to your tour, and I'm sure that we'll be able to, hopefully people will be able to listen and get to your, other resources and become more aware of all things Kevin Cole. So somewhere in between here, though, we spent time in Chicago, from what it sounds like. So for people who don't know, Ravinia is a Chicagoland outdoor festival, a very huge one. The world's leading
Oh yeah,
performers almost
yeah.
always
Since
go there.
since 1904, they've been around, and they are the country's largest summer music festival because they cover everything: rock, pop, classical, you name it. Yeah,
And during that period, at some point, you had a health scare.
I did. And it's actually it was it was when I moved back to Bay City after 22 years in Chicago.
Okay.
And I moved back because my mom had been ill
And your mother is how
for,
old?
well, she's 89 now and she's
Lovely.
fantastic. I mean,
Great.
as she likes to tell everybody, I still got my marbles. I said, yeah, I know you do. I know you got every marble you were ever given. But I was driving that 5-hour drive between Bay City and Chicago a lot.
Mhm.
And so I was barely in my apartment. I would literally drive to Chicago the next morning, get on a plane to play the concert, come back to Chicago the next morning, drive back to Bay City. So I said, well, this is
So you were
silly.
not even living, you were
No,
commuting,
no.
basically.
And so I said, you know what? There really isn't anything happening in Chicago, and Ravinia Festival, they will fly me in from anywhere anyway, or I can drive down.
Right.
And that's in the summer. So maybe I should regroup for 1 to 2 years, save some money, because obviously the cost of living is a lot cheaper in Bay City, Michigan. So I moved back in June of 2016. And little did I know, my mom was on the upswing. She was doing great. But little did any of us know that by November 3rd, my dad would die. Excuse me. That was unexpected. He went in for a CAT scan on Gershwin's birthday, of all things, September 26th. And but basically 5 weeks later was gone from T-cell lymphoma, which there was no cure for. Yeah. And so that was out of the blue. I think that he knew, since I had just moved back to Bay City, I had an apartment in Essexville, that he thought, oh, well, now's my chance to exit. He was 87. But he was in perfect health. He had just had blood work and everything done in the month I came back home in June. And he was perfect. And then he got a cold in August, and then boom. So that changed my picture, because I thought, oh, okay, well, I guess my apartment's going to be a storage unit, because I'm going to move back home into the house, because my oldest brother, who's retired, is there, and my mom, and they don't drive, either of them. So I said, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. I let go of my apartment then the following year. I fulfilled my year's lease because I had to have my stuff somewhere. And lo and behold, let me see, when would that have been? Well, it would have been January of 2017. I just noticed that there was numbness on this side of my face. And then, as the months progressed, I noticed that my taste buds were off, and the numbness was kind of halfway through the right side of my tongue. I noticed I was having some hearing problems with this ear. Excuse me. And every once in a while, I felt a little toddly. I'd be walking down the steps, and all of a sudden I had to catch myself. And well, that's weird. But I felt such blockage at a certain point by Thanksgiving of 2017. I said, I better go see an ENT. Maybe there's some kind of infection, blah, blah, blah. And from that meeting, he said, you got to have an MRI. From that MRI, he said, you have an acoustic neuroma, which I'd never heard about. It's a certain kind of tumor. He said, you have to go see Dr. Babu at the Michigan Ear Institute down near Novi, Birmingham area, north of Detroit. Went to see him. He showed me the MRI. Said, it's pretty big. We got to get this out of you. So March 19th of 2018, I had an 8-hour surgery to remove a life-threatening tumor, brain tumor. What's so weird is that it never impeded on my performing. In fact, I did a concert the Saturday. Was it the Saturday? either the Friday or Saturday. I think it was a Saturday, prior to the Monday of my surgery with Sylvia McNair in Ohio. And she drove me to Ascension St. John's Hospital in Novi after that concert in Ohio. And I played for her. And so it was very odd. I mean, I had things that were bothersome, but never to the point where it stopped my performing. And I didn't really realize how serious it was, which I guess is a hidden blessing. Everyone else around me knew
I'm
this
freaked
was
out now. So
yeah, this was kind of life and death, and I never
Yeah.
felt that. I felt in good hands with my surgeons. I just thought, well, they'll get this out of me, and that'll be that. And lo and behold, after this, oops, that was just showing me a little low power is what it's showing me. Part 2 might have to come up in a minute. But anyway, I had the surgery, and what I did was, and I had heard that surgeons listen to music sometimes when they when they operate. And since this was an 8-hour, it's an 8-hour surgery if it goes well. It's 12 hours if it doesn't go well. So I handed Dr. Babu assistant when I got in that morning, early morning, the CD and said, hey, if they listen to music, this is my Cole Plays Gershwin CD. So I heard after the fact that he had played it because he gets everything ready. And then another doctor comes to do the lifting of the tumor off. So I heard after the fact that Dr. Babu told the other doctor, you got to hear this.
This is the actual.
Yeah, you got to hear this. So they listened to it. He listened to it, and the second surgeon listened to it. And I came out of surgery, and what was funny was the first thing I said to doctor, because they put you in a waiting area post-op, and I could see this guy in a white coat walking towards me. It's kind of blurry, but as he came into focus, I remember the first thing I said was, "There's my angel," and he kind of smiled. And I put my hand out, and he grabbed my hand. And the first real thing, I looked at him and I said, "Did I make it? Am I still here?" And he laughed and later told me, he said, "I have never had a patient say that." I said, "Well, I don't know. You were in a white coat. I could have been in heaven. I don't know." So anyway, but the other thing that was remarkable, they said they had never had a patient. Because he said he came in 24 hours later. He comes into my room and says, the operation was picture perfect. Couldn't have gone better. He said, but the tumor was larger than even the MRI showed. It was one of the largest ones we've seen. And so when he left the room was when it finally sunk in that this really was serious. I didn't realize. But anyway, the physical therapist came in because they want to get you moving right away. And because what happens, first of all, you can have face paralysis, which is what was starting already. And you can also balance issues because of the ear. They weren't able to save the hearing in this ear. They had to sever the hearing nerve so that they could get the entire tumor out. And so I have no hearing, 0 in my right ear, and I have about 80 to 85% in my left ear. So that was, trying to get used to that is one thing. But I had to do physical therapy. And so the physical therapist came to my room, and I said, I have to go to the bathroom first, went with the walk with that. And he said, well, you're doing that so well. He said, so why don't we just, go out in the hall? And so we did. And he said, we're going to walk you to the room we're going to move you to later this afternoon out of ICU. It's fine. And then we got there. He said, I did so well. He said, you're going to walk back to your room without using a walker. And I turned to him. I said, isn't that kind of crazy? He goes, yeah, it is. So, but I did it. Got back to the room and he looked at me. He said, I have been doing PT for 24 years. And most of those have been with patients who just had this type of operation. I have never had a patient be able to do what you just did right after, within 24 hours of surgery. He said, it's unheard of. He said, I'm going to tell doctor. He said, because right now, I don't think you need any physical therapy. I said, is that good? He said, is that good? He goes, sometimes it takes a year, 2 years. It can go up to 3 years before people can regain walking and motor skills and whatnot. He said, I don't know what's up with you. So what they figured out, the only thing they could figure out, because it was so unusual, was that because of the way my brain is wired for music, all along, once this tumor started so tiny, and had we caught it soon enough, they can go in without having to open you up. But again, I didn't know,
So,
He said, Dr. Babu said to me, he said, what we figured is the way your brain is wired because of your years with music, anytime a physical thing was happening that could have gone worse, your brain was rewiring and finding a way around it so that you didn't have the major symptoms a person really has before they go into this with a tumor your size. So I
was there any concern? I mean, you had to be concerned, obviously, at some point. Any concern that you'd be able to, that there would be, a barrier to start playing again?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I didn't touch the piano for about 5.5 weeks. And I had a concert scheduled with David Allen Miller and the Albany Symphony for May 18th. 8 weeks to the day of the surgery. I didn't call David till 2 weeks before the surgery to tell him.
Oh yeah, by the way.
Yeah, because this concert had been on the books, and I had agreed.
Sure.
It was supposed to be all 4 Gershwin works, 2 one night, 2 the next night. But because of rehearsal schedules and unions and all this other stuff, it was all going to be one concert. And so I agreed with David that fall, before I was diagnosed with this, that I will play. I've never done this. I'll play all 4 works in one night, which is nobody's ever done that. All 4 Gershwin works one night. It's impossible. Basically, it's like Michael Phelps winning 11 gold medals.
Medals all the same day.
Yeah. So anyway, so 2 weeks before, I'm calling David Allen Miller and going, now I just want to talk to you about the concert. Oh, sure. Everything okay? Yeah, but I'm going to have brain surgery in 2 weeks, but it should be okay. Well, no, just you bow out. Well, I'll just make it an orchestra. I said, no, I need a goal. I said, if I can play 1 piece, you get 1. If I can play 2, I said, we'll just see what happens. Because I had no idea.
What did the doctors say? What did the doctors say? They must have set some expectation for you.
They didn't put any kind of expectation as far as music on me.
What they just said, we have no idea. Let's find out when you come out.
Well, I mean, they didn't see anything physically that should prevent it. It's just a matter of adjusting to the hearing.
Really?
For me, and then also because of hearing and because the brain is healing, does it affect any brain finger coordination?
Yeah, right. That's what I
mean. It didn't.
Really asking.
Yeah, it didn't seem to, from the test they gave me. But again, the tests aren't playing the piano, right. And the tests aren't about a 65, I don't know, maybe plus pages of concerto that I hope is still in my head, as well as another 50 for the Rhapsody, so I got 300 to 400 pages of music that I hope I can recall in my head.
Right.
Maybe it's okay, but you don't know. So when I sat down to play, the first thing I had to realize is that, I'm not stereo anymore, I'm mono. So it was just like going from Technicolor to black and white. Right. But I said, okay. I guess I was concerned.
That doesn't seem that bad. I mean,
yeah, I was just
all else equal.
Yeah, but I was just concerned that I didn't want to overcompensate and play louder like a Beethoven, because I can't hear it. But I came to the realization that it's not 80% hearing, 20% physical. It's 50-50, at least for me. That I know from touch, my loudest louds and my softest softs. But I had never analyzed this before. I just do it. Why would I analyze? This is what I do. This is what I'm built to do. But now I had to think about my relationship to creating music. So that was the other thing. The biggest thing, outside of knowing that I can feel it physically as well as hear it, that they're equal, I have to figure out, do I still have the same connection emotionally and inside when I play? Because I'm hearing half of what I used to hear.
Did you know that your memory of the 400 pages of music and that there's technique that you've practiced and muscle memory.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have freaked out that you wake up and you don't know if that's intact. Or did you kind of have some idea when you were yourself?
The first thing I played was a little passage from the Rhapsody in Blue. And the first thing I noticed, of course, was the hearing. And then I played it again. And then I started to talk to myself and say, well, what's different? And I said, other than hearing it at half volume, am I still connected to what I'm playing? And once I realized I was, then I thought, well, okay, I can deal with this. I still feel the same.
Sure.
And so I'll just see what happens. So the night of the concert, I mean, we had rehearsals that week, and I had to watch my energy, obviously, because I'm still recovering. The bandage came up, but I had this huge, bandage thing. I looked like Princess Leia with a big on my ear, cinnamon bun, and so, but I didn't know my stamina because obviously I didn't quite have the energy, but I needed to have the energy if I was going to get through four pieces one night, plus an encore. I think I played 2 encores, but it was there and I did it. And I don't know if they did an archival recording or not. I didn't ask. I should ask. They usually do, but it felt great. And I figured if I could do that 8 weeks after brain surgery, when I'm not really full power and I can still get through the 4 pieces, I'm going to be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's an incredible story. A brain tumor, especially when all of your synapses have so much to do with your touch and speed, and your speed has to do, and power, are all connected to your brain. You're not like a dead weightlifter or something like that. You're talking about something pretty delicate and just unbelievable. Okay, so Kevin, we're here now. I had a couple of other questions, that I had kind of mentally. So now an 8-year-old person comes to you and says, Kevin, Mr. Cole, I like music. What are you going to tell him?
How much do you like it? You like it as a hobby? They wouldn't realize the word hobby is kind of old-fashioned. Do you like it because you just enjoy it for yourself? Or are you saying you want to be a performer in front of thousands of people?
I want to be a performer. So now what should I do?
Study and really fine-tune your craft and decide what type of music is going to be your platform. How? Because it doesn't. You can't be. Well, even at 8 years old, unless you're some kind of child prodigy, okay. It's not too early you should explore all genres of music for piano, because something's going to speak to you, and it may speak to you early, or it may speak to you as a teenager, or even later. Excuse me. People have to realize George Gershwin wasn't born a prodigy like a Mozart and all these others. He didn't come to music till he was like 10, 11 years old. In fact, he thought that anyone that played music of his classmates was a sissy. And he'd get in fights about it. He could care less about music. But he heard a classmate of his in a school recital play Dvorak's Humoresque on the violin. And for some reason, that kid, Max Rosen, was a friend of Gershwin's. I don't know how he slipped through because he played music. But after Gershwin heard that piece of music, it unlocked something in him that he wanted to go into music. I mean, so much so that he went to a neighbor. I don't know if he had a store, but he had a player piano at this, I'll say, general store. And Gershwin would skip school and he was going to that player piano, pumping it, putting his fingers in where the keys would go down, and taught himself 2 pop songs of the day that way with no piano lessons because he was so driven. So when Mama Gershwin decided that their little house in Brooklyn, they needed a piano because her sister had a piano, and that was kind of a status thing. Piano came through the window, and they thought Ira, the older brother, would be the one to get lessons. George ran to it, sat down, and played those 2 pieces. And his mom and dad and Ira were all floored because this is George, who they thought would become a bum. He was the ruffian. He was the roller skate champ. He could care less about music. So then he started his lessons. So you never know when the calling, hits, and what piece of music speaks to you that unlocks that is the key. And for me, it was that movie. Boom. For George, it was Dvorak's Humoresque, which is perfect because it has that little blue note da, 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 at the end. And that, I'm sure, all of a sudden, like, what is that? And for an 8-year-old, who knows? Who knows what it is? But I would just say, if you really want to be a performer, you study from as many people as you can and take all that information and keep playing different types of music. And all of a sudden you'll say, one week it'll be this song you like, the next week it'll be this song, but eventually it'll turn into something.
If it was the same person 18, I just have this thought. Am I too late?
No.
I don't have, but I don't have a decade of piano. I mean, you're 18, you have 10 years of experience already. You're sitting already as a winner of a competition, sitting at a national music camp at a prodigy today.
Right.
Can they be discovered at 18 and
well, sure.
time?
Well, look, okay, but look at an Irving Berlin. Okay, who was not known as a pianist, but certainly wrote more hit songs than just about anybody. He could only play the piano in one key that he's taught himself. He couldn't read music, couldn't write down his own music, so he had to hire music secretaries. He'd call them at 2 a.m. You got to come down. He'd play it. They'd take notation as he's playing it, and he did okay. I mean, I don't think he went to school more than a year as a kid. Some days as a little kid, he only had an apple as his entire meal for a day that he had to steal off a cart. And so you just don't know. And he had his biggest hit musical at the age of 57, Annie Get Your Gun. So, yeah, it's just a toss-up.
Almost.
Yeah, and with social media and this, the way we can do things,
True.
out of sci-fi. Yeah, it makes careers overnight, or at least gets your attention faster than ever. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Okay, Kevin. So last question before we get back to wrapping up and talking about your tour. Last question. You've played with a bunch of different other groups or individuals.
Yeah.
The craziest one.
What's the craziest one?
The craziest personality that you had to share a stage with was blank.
Okay, well, they're living, so this makes it a little tricky.
You can choose,
and they're on social media, so they'll probably see this. So I'm going to leave that person out. I'm trying to think of one who's not here anymore.
But that exists, right? That exists, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, I can tell you a really interesting situation that was totally unique, and that
was.
I'm
going to let you off the hook. Go with that.
Okay. Well, David Allen Miller and I both played Gershwin, an all Gershwin concert with the Vietnam National Symphony Orchestra, and that orchestra had never played Gershwin. This was back in 2010, and so that was an experience to see adults who had never played Gershwin, and we're so excited to be able to play this music. And you're thinking, this day and age, they haven't, but no, because how would they? They played serious works. Their brass had most of their training. They were military brass. So they were just learning how to play orchestrally. So to all of a sudden have dropped me in, and we did this Gershwin concert, that was the love in that room and the anxiousness. And they were so happy to try this music. And so it was just like, oh my word. And this is 2010. So that was really unique. That was extremely unique and a lovely, lovely experience because they were so happy with this music, and to see them light up, hearing chords in things that they had never heard. Yeah, that was cool.
All right, Kevin. So thank you so much. So
you bet.
We've got the album. We've got Centennial, right, for these
I hope. Like I said, I'm working on that right now because now's the time to formulate a tour and see who will book me. So I'm in talks this week and next week, and it's going to take a few weeks to coordinate and put our package together. But I sure hope anybody seeing this, if you got a symphony orchestra in your backyard, put it a good word. I'm always telling people when they go, oh, we want to have you back. If somebody afterwards, I'm signing a program, I say, put in a good word for me. I'll do that. I said, well, yeah, because if they hear feedback and say, we want Kevin back, I come back.
Absolutely. That's your best referral. Yeah. Naxos, we've got Concerto in F by Kevin Cole. What is the word that they're, and I've seen the other reviews as well, but check out the links in the podcast as well as the video, links to the album that's sitting up on, you can buy it on Amazon. I saw the album on Spotify. You can listen to it there as well. I'm not sure if you even knew that, but it's there. Naxos, a huge label. Congratulations, Steve. That's quite an achievement. I mean, like I said, I've got literally over 1,000 classical CDs. And so I would know, at least there's the Deutsche Grammophones and the Angels,
Yeah.
and the EMIs, etc. And of course, Telarc, and certainly out there is Naxos and, that niche group of, very highly specialized musicians, etc. And, congratulations. That's pretty.
Thank you.
All
Thanks,
right.
Jay. This has been fun.
I've enjoyed it as well. Kevin Cole, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you.
See ya.
Well, I enjoyed meeting with Kevin, a person that I knew many, many years ago, but just happened to reconnect with him recently since the release of his new album. Be sure to check it out. He's on Naxos. Again, that's Gershwin Concerto in F with Kevin Cole. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, any other platform that you digest your podcast. I'm Jay. This is the Much More Than Maximize Your Medicare podcast. Speak with you next time.